Now you might say that, I'm going to read my entire anthropology, and once I finish my entire anthropology, I'll take my pen and I'll take my paper, okay, and I'll write a beautiful, well-crafted answer. ऐसा होता नहीं है. That if you're preparing, you're going to be targeting the top single-digit rank, double-digit rank, मतलब आपको चाहिए IAS, right? So if you want to do that, you want to take, your optional to this top 1%, so that gives you that chance. Conceptual clarity is easier to see. Okay, they're not testing you कि आपने कितना effort दिया है, आपने कितना memorize किया है, आपने कितना लिखा है. Is not basically what they're trying to take a look at. Are you hitting the essence of what has been asked in that particular question? Are you hitting the nail on its head? Is basically what they're trying to see. So hello everyone. My name is Nataraj. I'm your anthropology faculty at Sarrthi IAS. So welcome to this session. So we are having a session talking about, let's say the audience is, when I say freshers, what I mean is, let's say you have chosen to take anthropology. Anthropology is going to be a subject for UPSC. Now you may have done it a little bit, you may not have started, but you have decided on anthropology. Regardless, you feel like you're at least somewhere in the beginning stage. What works, what doesn't work. Now it's very difficult to say how to score in anthropology in, let's say 20-25 minutes, or how many minutes I'm going to take here, right? But it requires 2-3 hours to basically give you an idea in different sort of modules, at different sort of phases of your stages of your preparation, what you should do. But I will try to give you some actionable inputs, and a lot of this has also been based on your questions that you have sent, right? So I will try to take those FAQ kind of aspects as well. What should be the stages? What should be the sequence? What is ideal? What should your answers be like? Okay, and what should be the best use of your time? So right, so we'll basically take a look at this. So anthropology strategies for students who still feel they are in the fresher stage, right? So the first question that you had asked, and I think most of you have this, in your starting, when you're basically starting in a particular course, right? So how do I basically start, right? So what should be the main input that I have? So when it comes to sources, see my suggestion, and I have a few slides on sources, right? I'll go into a little more in depth. See, if you feel like your foundation course covered, and you have good knowledge, you have good conceptual understanding from it, my suggestion is, if you read it, please stick with it, okay? And if you feel like that was not sufficient, and you feel like just relevance nahi hai, then fine, okay, let's stick with something. You can't stick with something that probably doesn't work, and if you're very convinced about it. But I would say you try to keep it minimal, right? So there are a lot of good anthropology books in the market. There are great authors from around the world who have written on anthropology. It does not mean you have to focus on all of them, right? So whatever it is, you try to keep it minimal. And if you're choosing a standard sources, great. If you're choosing your foundation course material, that is also great. But have one for one particular topic is basically the main sort of principle, okay? And I'll go into a little more in depth in a slide or two, and what you can do, and for which module, and what will be your return on investment, and so on, right? So that is that. See, when you're starting with anthropology, if you're writing mains now, so you basically don't have this benefit, right? So you can't go in a particular sequence. This is, in my opinion, a lot more sort of logical sort of sequence, and this is an optimized kind of a preparation sort of sequence, right? So when you do this, step one, okay, and then you focus, if you've made adequate sort of like progress in your step one, then you basically move to step two, and then eventually step three is your exam day, right? So, this is basically the process. But let's say if you're writing mains, it's very difficult for you to be able to sort of follow this. But I will tell you how you can still do this, right? So why this? So the first thing that you want to focus on is not what is the PYQ. It's not what is what I need to remember for this particular topic. You first, if you're reading on a particular topic, let's say, it is marriage in sociocultural anthropology, or if it is, let us say, let us say that it is, let's say, tribes, and and tribes in different sort of countries, how are they being treated, right? So don't sort of box yourself in, okay? If there is something in your topic, in your syllabus, right? So you ensure that you have good conceptual clarity about it. Okay, kitne facts chahiye, kitne depth chahiye, this is something that is not as important at the moment, but at least you should understand how does this fit into anthropology. Okay, you should not feel like anthropology is so many different subjects together, right? So, if it's conceptual clarity, let us take an example of biology. Okay, a lot of students love biology. Biology is, to be honest, very easy to score, right? But you can't be a biologist, you can't be a pharmacist, you can't be a geneticist, you can't be a medical doctor when you write this particular paper. So why is there a conceptual sort of relevance within anthropology, right? So if you know a little bit of anthropology, if it's biology, right? So what is its relevance in us understanding? Well, kahin na kahin it has to be able to explain evolution a little better. Okay, it might be able to help you understand, yeah, basically give you sort of a different kind of insights about variation amongst humans. It could be basically related to some genetic aspects. It could be, something to do with, let's say, the human body, the growth, the diseases, right? So these are all part of a syllabus, or at least some sort of applications. If that is the case, now you have understood what topic anthropology may hack you and what is its relevance and what are they basically expecting you to sort of know about this beyond the science, right? To that. Okay. Second thing is, let's say that you have studied it or read it, right? Matlab, if you have done it in handouts or if you have basically done it from a particular book, thoda sa notes bana lo. Okay, that is something that you would do, and it does not have to be very detailed. Okay, matlab, just see to it that what you have read, कुछ ना कुछ तो आपको वो context याद दिलाए, right? So this is something that you want to do, but ideally, you try to make notes on a particular topic, okay, to some extent, and then eventually try to sort of commit it to memory. So let's say, you have done some reading about Homo erectus, so when you read the cursory sort of reading, you will be like, ठीक है, okay, so it basically seems like, he's a huge traveler, he basically goes to, Southeast Asia, he's basically in Europe, he's basically in Africa, okay, and so there seems to be a little bit of variance when it comes to the height and weight and the what do you put it in simple terms, the brain size, right? All of these kind of things. Okay, now I have understood it. Okay, also sort of try to note down some things. Now thing is, if you basically read it, try to remember some of those things as well. Okay, so when you remember that, okay, so you will understand how it relates to the previous topic that you have read and how does it relate to the next topic that you're going to read. So that is important. Or, agar handout se kar rahe ho, so basically at least try to go through that and ensure that conceptual clarity hai, but now you have that, you're able to sort of speak on it. Okay, itna confidence hai. And then I would say that, let's say that, you're going to be focusing on getting your anthropology done. It is not going to be done without writing, right? So reading to aap karoge. Now you might say that, I'm going to read my entire anthropology, and once I finish my entire anthropology, I'll take my pen and I'll take my paper, okay, and I'll write a beautiful, well-crafted answer. Aisa hota nahi hai. Always remember, when you do this, okay, you will have better idea on like how to make your notes. And even better, it will also tell you how to make short notes. Right? I have a couple of examples because that's a question that you guys wanted. Even in the previous session, students basically asked about it, and I could not show it, but now I'll basically show you, right? And eventually, agar aapka step number 1 ho gaya, step number 2 ho gaya, step number 3 ho gaya, okay, and you have sort of understood ki short notes is required for what? You cannot make short notes for the entire thing. Again, then it will become notes, right? So that's not what you want to do. Short notes is essentially what are the things in that particular topic, what are the important sort of keywords in that topic, what are the kind of scholars, perspectives, debates, hypotheses in that particular topic, right? What are these extra things that you would want to sort of revise more times than just that particular answer? Right? Okay, it could be examples, it could be some specifics, right? So what you would need it, I'll give you an example of that. And agar ye bhi ho gaya, then essentially you basically move to tests. Now the first test that you write, would you write it in 3 hours? Would you write all your answers in 7 minutes and 11 minutes and 14 minutes? Okay, are you prepared? Actually, if you're writing mains, go for it, right? You don't have that time. But let's say you are in the beginning stage, right? I would suggest that you first learn to write an answer taking a little extra time, okay, taki you know what is a 150-ish kind of paper ka answers, right? Once you get to that 150-ish, then you can start focusing on reducing that time. But pehli bar, if you basically start with 7 minutes and 11 minutes and 14 minutes, before you start crafting good answers, okay, then it is going to be average nahi, below average, but that's fine, okay? So my whole idea here is that, when you start writing answers, it is going to be that you will start with bad answers. Thoda sa, you continue writing, you're going to get a little bit of a promotion in terms of your answers. So you're going to have below average answers. And again, you write a little more, you're going to have average answers, congratulations. Then above average, and then some good answers. And some point you will basically get all good answers, right? So this is essentially the progression that will happen. But again, uske liye you'll have to do daily answer writing, and daily answer writing, you take it, not in 7 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, 13 minutes. Time ko mat dekho, content ko dekho, crafting skills ko dekho, okay, sequencing ko dekho, structuring ko dekho, prioritization, deprioritization. There are many aspects that come into answer writing. So you focus on all those things, and untimed test is essentially like, you going through this, after another answer, and you're able to sort of consistently get your answers to be above average and good, and possibly some answers a little great, right? So until it becomes your eventual baseline, right? So abhi to it will not be in that particular form. But let's say that you have invested in all of these things, then you can essentially move to, let's say, the next stage. And the next stage ke liye you will be so prepared and so thorough, okay? I'm telling you, your very first test you will be competing for the top 3. Okay, it doesn't matter whether these students have been, service mein hai, ki multiple mains likh chuke hain. Okay, they've already scored 280 in recent years, not 2-3 years ago, nahi, right? Like in recent years, they're able to score that kind of score, right? You will be able to compete with them because your base work is strong. Okay, अगर ये skip करोगे, then it is very difficult यहाँ पे, because each stage where you will realize, hey, conceptual clarity for some aspect is kind of missing. Yeah, you know, it is becoming a little difficult to sort of like, you know, see what I know, what I don't know. You know, this, it's not in all one place, right? Or I wish I had done a little more answer writing here. I don't feel the same sort of like, you know, feel when I write these kind of answers. It's taking me a little more in terms of, you know, crafting and sequencing and prioritizing, right? It's taking me a little more time than I would want, right? Making short notes. I wish I could revise this early. I wish I had written these answers, you know, like 19 answers, before, so that, you know, I would have a little more, comfort in these kind of things. But अगर ये करके आओगे ना, trust me, you're going to be competing with for the rank list from the very first test, right? So आप test लिखोगे तब थोड़ा सा more analytical questions होंगे, easy questions भी होंगे, moderate questions भी होंगे, but more so you will see that, you know, UPSC में there are a lot of questions that are more analytical. Okay, 2020, 21, even 22 to some extent, basically you have questions that you can still choose that are very much expected lines, right? Directly from PYQ themes or directly from your syllabus. So आपने पढ़ा है, if you can remember it, you know, you're going to score on it, right? But these days you have to basically think in the exam, right? So this particular skill will require a little more analytical kind of questions, and then practice doing that, and थोड़ा सा value addition, some specifics that you can basically add, मतलब 10-20% of, you know, spices that you can add to your answer. ये करोगे, trust me, and then, you know, you go through a few rounds of FLTs. पहले FLT1 लिखो, and then FLT2. Another day you basically study only FLT and basically write that, and eventually get to a point जहाँ पे FLT1 and FLT2 लिखोगे. That is, you know, that's going to be progress. Okay, you will understand कि उसका challenge ही क्या है, and then do that like 2-3 times, and then eventually when you go to the mains, trust me, there are going to be students who have actually invested a lot more time, a lot more sort of preparation, a lot more years than you, and you're able to sort of like, you know, compete with all of them and possibly beat them all as well, right? So this kind of a sequence is ideal. Now, in case you're starting and you have a little bit of time, try to focus on this. Now let's say that, you know, you are a student who's like, you know, only this is not something that I would do. मुझे लग रहा है कि I might lose my focus, I might lose my momentum, I might lose my motivation, you know, all these kind of things. अगर ऐसा है, okay, and or if you're writing mains, let's say if you're doing that, just do this 5, okay, and go to the first module ka test. Okay, write one for that particular thing. So you don't have to conquer the entire thing and basically go here, or at least finish this, okay, and then take this, okay, and then finish this and again take this. And even in this particular manner, if you're able to do it, okay, it'll take you a little more time. You might not be able to sort of stick with a particular test series ka schedule, okay, but you will be able to at least be able to compete, right, in your very first test. I'm telling you, if you do this and basically come here, right, your very first sociocultural anthro answer, your very first archaeology, fossils, theories, miscellaneous, whatever it is, right, you are going to be competing, amongst the best, right? So this is a ideal sort of sequence. Okay, so see if you can sort of incorporate this element also part of your answer. Okay. So conceptual clarity, revising your handouts, if you're taking a foundation course handouts, or if you're basically, if you're making your own sort of notes, or if you've made your notes, or if you've already attended somewhere, right? Okay, daily answer writing, you know, making short notes, untimed tests, then tests, and, you know, whatever kind of value addition, whatever was missing in that particular test, you basically add to that, and then eventually you will be going to your UPSC mains related one, right? So I hope this is kind of clear. A lot of questions about source, right? See, source to some extent I think is important. Okay, what you study is important, but I don't want to specifically name any particular one resource. But when you're reading, let's say you're reading standard textbooks, okay, try to not limit yourself only to the particular question that is asked in PYQ. Today, if you see, there are questions that you have not seen in PYQs, right? In fact, it could be PYQ theme, but you're not able to tell that it is the same question. Right? So if I ask you a question about hominin and hominid and hominoid, right? So there have been n number of questions that have basically asked for the same thing, but this is basically a different type of question. This is घुमा फिरा के but पूछते same ही है. Okay, it could be those as well, but you will not be able to understand that that is basically what they're asking. Or there are questions jahan pe they're asking from areas of syllabus that they have not asked in the past. So at least what you want to do is that when you're reading, okay, keep syllabus in mind rather than just the PYQs, right? PYQs may, if there are questions from those PYQs or the PYQ themes, okay, you will be able definitely be able to answer. But 30-40% of the questions in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024, which are not straight from any particular book, okay, but requires you to think like an anthropologist and craft like an anthropologist and provide some sort of, and the best way in which you can address that question in comparison to your competitor, if that is basically the competition here, right? And if that's a comparison, यहाँ पे I would definitely say that, you know, your focus on syllabus would do you a lot more good than just the PYQs ka this one, because PYQs mein you're basically doing silo based preparation. So do your syllabus, and if you know every part of your syllabus really well and you have good conceptual understanding ki why, what is the context, okay, and you know the thoda sa extra layers in depth mein aap karoge na, right? So if PYQs aap uthaoge, most likely you will be able to handle those PYQs a lot better, right, compared to anybody else, right? So that would be that as well. Now, regarding short notes, right, a lot of you asked me this question, even in the previous session, a lot of you asked this question, how do you make short notes? So this is a particular student from our foundation course. If you can see this, so this is basically biological anthropology. It is the evolution page, right? So terms and concepts of evolutionary biology, you have your Dollo's law, so the years, the scholars, okay, the scholar names, right, all been highlighted, okay, certain, so if you can see this here, so all the diagrams that you need for this particular topic that is from the handout has been sort of like taken in, okay, and not only, so you have a graph, you basically have an interesting sort of, this one from our, handout, you have the same sort of diagrams, everything has basically been extracted and put into short notes, jahan pe this entire lecture, okay, and I think this entire lecture is like one full day ka lecture, right? One full lecture, your chapter, it is in your evolutionary biology wala chapter is basically covered, and not only that, you've also prepared for the topic that has been, Dollo's law and Cope's, okay, Gauss, okay, even in a tabular sort of a manner, so right, so you basically have this. Agar aapko ye karna hai, it's basically going to take you, the pehle time it might take you like 10 minutes, but eventually you can even revise this in a minute, okay, because you've also highlighted which are the aspects that you tend to forget, okay, which are the specifics that require more sort of revisions. Similarly, if you take a look at this, right, so this is another student again from our foundation course, right? So course ke time itself, if you finish it, it's like great, okay, so once you write an answer, then you will understand what are the things that need to go into your short notes. So if you can see this here, this is basically religion and magic, religion, okay, etymology, definitions, okay, and definitions and comparisons. E.B. Tyler, okay, and how is that betterment here? Okay, Durkheim and Wallace, right? So different colored pen, so not elaborated on sacred things. What is it? Okay, improvement in Taylor's definition, right? Functions, and each one ke liye example, so you can basically see the different anthropological approaches and the different kind of viewpoints. Okay, E.B. Tyler, Fraser, Merritt, psychological approach, Sigmund Freud. You have your Malinowski. You have your Brown, you have example C. Botres in Kerala, so you basically have written C. Coorg, M. N. Srinivas, right? So I'm not able to see as much, okay? So these are the things. Myth and ritual, you have like 3 different sort of viewpoints. Myth influences rituals say, myths, and basically both of them influence each other, and so on and so forth, along with examples from daily life. Okay, so this is Lord Lakshmi, and so on and so forth. You have like particular story. This is basically Deepavali, right? So on and so forth. So basically, you have essentially brought up, I'm not sure exactly, 2 to 3 pages max for religion and magic. That's an entire chapter number 5, right? So all of these things, and for very quick sort of revision. Agar aapko iske baad aapko revise karna ho, to it will become a lot easier if you can just make it something like this, right? Lot of examples. In fact, one thing that I'm seeing here is a lot of examples. Okay, so this is also something. So examples, scholars, even the structure, the different sort of heads that you want to sort of incorporate. So that could also be. Okay, so sources, I think I've handled this, right? So come here. Okay, so there you go. See, one aspect that I want you to know, especially as a fresher, if you feel like you're in the beginning stage, right? So if I can come here and just help you understand, see, there is a difference between scoring in GS, okay, and in optional, and this is true for any optional. Okay, so if I can just tell you, see, GS mein aisa hai is that, you have to know, you have to be a well-read person, you have to understand what is happening in the world, you have to have specifics about, the different things that you have in the syllabus. But generally the reading that is required is basically at a school level, right? The points are basically, they're expecting a lot more sort of breadth in your points, okay, that your ability to, bring in so many different, a variety of points rather than the depth of those points. But jab aap yahan hoge, so if this is school level, okay, optional becomes slightly different. Optional becomes a lot more of master's level, okay? So there should be no doubt about this, okay? So if it is a master's level paper, it basically requires those additional depth ka layers, right? So you have to sort of have at a much larger sort of depth. But not only this, agar GS mein, so let's say you're going to be having 20 questions in your paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, ethics mein you have 125 ka normal 10 markers, and then you have 130 and then 120 ka case studies, right? So 250 marks ke liye, if you're able to bring in, if you're able to address 12 questions well, another 4 questions with relevant sort of content, you're recruiting ideas from here, there, and all of these kind of things, and eventually 4 questions तो difficult तो होते ही हैं, right? But you're able to do all of these kind of things, reasonable amount of justice आपको मिलेंगे, depending upon how you've done, 90, 100, 110. Okay, it is not dependent on anybody else. That's an important point, right? So it is more like your board exams. अगर board exam में क्या होता है, like in school when you essentially went in March and you wrote your exam, it did not depend on how the others have basically done, right? Nobody told you that. Okay, अगर आपने किया है तो आपके marks मिल चुके हैं. But this is more like a percentile system. So what do I mean by percentile? Okay, percentile system is in every optional. Okay, the good scores are always available. So every year you'll see students who are scoring 150 plus, all the options, most of the options. You basically have students who are scoring well, but those scores are limited to 1% of the students. So essentially the way to score is that you have to convince your evaluator that you are better than, let's say 2000 people are writing this exam, that means you're in the top 20 in the country in terms of who's writing it. If there are 100 people writing, that basically means you have to be in the top 1. Okay, you're better than everybody else. Okay, itna depth hai aapke answers mein. So it means ki top 1% ya top 5% max. Okay, 5% can get you to interview, but maybe not the top sort of, let's say that the rank of your choice, or you get the picture, right? So it basically will. So, but anything outside of this thing, your score becomes 250, 240, 230. Okay, good, pad liya aapne and all of that kind of thing. But the final prize jo aapko chahiye, which is basically a single digit rank, a double digit rank, yeah, at least a triple digit rank bhi, a job, right? Wo milna, it becomes slightly difficult. So your entire focus here should be to be not only at this particular depth, but compete with others who also have this kind of depth and be in the top 1%, 5%, and that will be the main thing. Okay, so I hope this is kind of clear. So when you're studying for optional, you have to ensure that aap competitive ho, okay, and your paper, regardless of whether it is an easy paper, whether it is a moderate paper, analytical paper, difficult paper, right, all of these things, you have to have, to be in the top 1% and the top 5%, मतलब ये करना ही पड़ेगा in case you want a good score. Okay, GS में क्या है? You have to be able to write something on anything. Okay, something meaning like you have to be able to generate points very easily. Okay, you should be able to generate points. You have to have some examples, but यहाँ पे you have to be in the top 1%. मतलब if others are also doing extremely well, उससे भी better आपको करना पड़ेगा, right? So that is another sort of aspect. Okay, and one common thing, and I think this is something that I'm addressing in all sessions, is that generally, and this is something that used to work in the past. आप अगर उठाओगे 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, okay, 2023 and 2024 has been slightly different, but 2022 tak, you could actually decide that I am going to be a specialist not in anthropology, but in sociocultural anthropology, biological anthropology. I'm going to be a specialist in let us say Indian tribes. Okay, अगर if I'm very good at tribes of India, why should I be in Indian society? उसमें क्यों expert बनूं, right? That doesn't work anymore, right? You can't be like, I'm so good at biological anthropology, it seems very simple, it's very straightforward, I'm a person of science and I think it is something that I can pick up, right? It does not work anymore. And that is why you will notice that the people who have actually done, the students who had actually done really well and went into service in 2020, 2021, 2022, okay, but in the last couple of years, their score is not that great, despite the fact that they're putting in effort. They were so good even then, right? Because approach has changed to some extent. If you're a specialist in one area, that need not be, something that can actually get you to the top 1%, top 5%. You might be great in that particular module, but it is very difficult to choose questions only from that particular module. Previously, okay, from 2014 all the way till 2000, I want to say last 2 years ago, okay, 2022, okay, or 2013, okay, so from the new pattern, from then you had section A was all sociocultural anthropology. If that's your, if you're a liberal arts student, you have good writing, if you have, that kind of interest, you would probably choose more questions from here. So one question is anyways compulsory, okay, and then you will choose 2 questions from here, हो गया 150, okay, and then, वहाँ पे एक compulsory है, so you have to choose only 1 from bio. Okay? So most of your paper you basically handled it quite well, okay, in your area. If people are really into bio, then basically what they do is that section B में पूरा 150 marks लेंगे, एक तो question तो anyway sociocultural का करना पड़ेगा, and 1 question हम handle कर लेंगे, which is like वो choice जो हमें select करना पड़ेगा. That does not work anymore. So take a look at this, right? So if you take a look at these kind of questions, these are all the choice वाला questions from your last year का paper. Look at this, historical particularism 20 marker. in comparison to classical evolutionism. That is your theory wala module. You see here, Mehergad, food production, domestication of animals, throw light on significance. This is your archaeology and fossils and primate kind of modules, right? So archaeology, let's put it as archaeology, right? And here you have your lifestyle diseases and all of this. This is again your bio. So essentially what you have here, you have your socio, you have your archeo, you have your bio. Again, take a look at this. Right? So here at least you can choose the sections of your choice. No, you don't get to. Okay, karyotype. Okay, that's going to be a biological anthropology. Urbanization and impact on family, sociocultural anthropology. Okay, then this is basically your chapter 6, 7, 8. Mein, you have your theories and research methods, right? So that is basically that. So again, 3 different modules may you have to. So you're not going to get a choice to choose your module of choice. Okay, you've got to be, see, matlab aapko, you have to be at a base level in every. And when I say base, it doesn't mean that you have to be average. You have to be at least good rehna padega, right? Some sections you can be like great, but overall you basically have to have, because you're not going to be able to choose questions otherwise. Okay, so take a look at this. This is going to be Ruth Benedict. So this is theories. You have your Acheulean older one tradition, so archaeology. You have genetic counseling. So the theory is the same. Okay, I can make this, the new normal, right? So अगर 2023, 2024 का model से आपको score करना है in 2025 and 2026, right? So you can't be a specialist in one. So you've got to have adequate depth in, your fossils, okay, your primate family, okay, Homo erectus and so on and so forth, right? You've got to be, in biological anthropology, you have to have a certain kind of depth. You also have to have it in your theories and sociocultural and everything. Okay, iske bina, not one question is available in that manner, jahan pe you can be a specialist and focus on only one area, right? So look at this, Jacques Derrida, right? So this is your postmodernism theories, you have your multifactorial trait, okay, which is going to be your biological, and then you have your sampling techniques, your research method, right? So no question from one particular module, and you can see this here as well, right? So this is also something as a fresher, so don't take a extreme liking to one and say that I'm going to try to sort of like top in that and the others I will be able to somehow manage. That is a strategy that worked in the past, okay, and it has worked for many, and it has taken many to service, okay, but this is a strategy that is not working anymore. Okay, so when you are starting, try to take interest in all areas of anthropology, and they're all kind of very interesting, right? I'm sure that you will also find it to be very interesting. In fact, which area do you notice is anthropology today, right? So you have paper 1 mein kya hai, biological, physical, okay, biological anthro, ya physical anthro, sociocultural anthro, theories and miscellaneous. I'm placing it separately. You have archaeo and fossils, your excavation related things, your dating related things, and the features, the reconstructing the past, right? That kind of feature, right? So you have that in paper 2 as well, Indian society and tribal. But if you see, okay, in India, anthropology is primarily it's a liberal arts subject. It's a humanities subject. You have a lot of biology, okay, but to get to the biology, okay, to the real core biology itself will basically take you, you have to get through a lot of the liberal arts kind of subject. Most of the faculty members today, they have a, their base in, liberal arts and humanities. Okay, a lot of the answers that you write basically have to be, the kind of ways in which art students basically write. So, writing ability is required. Now, if you take sociocultural is not only 30% of your paper. You have, most of your paper to 80-90% of your paper to, barring your archaeology and fossils, is essentially your sociocultural anthropology. So a person, in case agar aapko hona hai, so you will see a lot of people, especially in the past, paper 1 में extremely high scores and paper 2 not so great scores, right? So now you can't focus on one particular area alone, right? But today you are actually seeing people who are able to score in one paper are actually able to score well in the other paper as well. So in case your sociocultural anthropology is strong, okay, naturally you're going to be able to score in your paper 2 as well, because 80-90% of your paper is, sociocultural anthro. Right? So if you put this together, you have it. In fact, RQ also, to a great extent, you might make it a lot more technical, but actually if you look at the questions, okay, they're asking for more analysis. Okay, and analysis and debates are, basically something that you would have to sort of use your writing abilities to sort of, add those layers. Okay, rather than just, point number 1, matter of fact, right, is not something that basically happens here. Overall, so in case you're preparing, okay, and I'm guessing that if you're preparing, you're going to be targeting the top single digit rank, double digit rank, मतलब आपको तो चाहिए IAS, right? So if you want to do that, you want to take, your optional to this top 1%, so that gives you that chance, right? Many of the students that we have, in fact, ranked number 9 of this year, right? So anthropology played a huge part, right? In fact, okay, he's done well in GS plus essay, but the paper in which he has made the big sort of difference is anthropology. In fact, in many of the sessions, he basically has said, "Ki 70% of the time I gave it to my optional." Okay, so you understand why. So why do you need that much time for 2 papers? Because you want not to just know anthropology, it has to be in such a depth that it is evident that you are in the top 1%. अगर top 1% नहीं है तो top 1, 2, 3% evaluator आप decide कर लो. right? But it can't be the top 10%, 15%. वहाँ पे marks नहीं बन रहे. Okay, they're all good students, right? But marks, if you see 150 plus, how many students will be there? In fact, it's very, very rare, right? So मतलब 2000 लोग लिख रहे हैं, and then it's very difficult to find people with 150 plus. Okay, so that means कि top 1%, you have to get to that particular point. Now, what do you have to do? First of all, reading, understanding, conceptual clarity, right? So, when I say conceptual clarity, it helps you add that depth in your answer. This is not a paper jahan pe, you can study it like GS, right? So, every part of it, you need to have a certain kind of depth. You have to understand how did we come to understand this as of today? Okay, why is this accepted? What was the journey to this, right? So we basically believed in so-and-so, but this so-and-so got disproved because of so-and-so kind of finding or so-and-so kind of thoughts by certain other kind of scholars, and that these are the reasons why, right? So, you basically get this, right? So this is basically what we call as layering or in-depth, right? So once you have that, then you basically focus on writing a lot of answers, right? Until you get comfortable with it. You knowing a concept and being able to sort of like pen it down, in 4 pages, okay, versus penning it down in 3 pages, versus penning it down in 2 pages, versus penning it down in 1 page, 1 paragraph or 1 sentence. Okay, boxed sentence, highlight aapko karna hai, but utna hi space hai. Whatever you have to do, all this basically takes a lot of practice. Okay, so writing is something that you would want to do. Ensure that there is clarity of concepts. A lot of the questions are becoming more analytical. Conceptual clarity is easier to see. Okay, they are not testing you कि आपने कितना effort दिया है, आपने कितना memorize किया है, आपने कितना लिखा है. Is not basically what they're trying to take a look at. Are you hitting the essence of what has been asked in that particular question? Are you hitting the nail on its head? Is basically what they're trying to see, right? So all of these are elements that you would want to sort of focus on in your preparation stage. Okay, so all of these things are going to get you to that top 1%. Top 1%, I would say in each paper it has to be 150 plus. Okay, at least you should try to get to 140 plus in one paper and 150 plus in the other paper, right? मतलब आपको करना है, and it is possible. 2023 and 2024 have been a little harder to score, right? In all options, right? So, but top 1% are also getting through because of their optional score. So you have no other option than to sort of like aim to be in the top 1%, but it will be possible provided you have sufficient depth. It is easier to score in paper 2. Okay, paper 2 is like 20% of the size of your paper 1. Okay, mostly it is analysis, mostly it is more analytical sort of concepts. Okay, and उसमें आपको depth में जाना है. Right, the question sometimes even seems like it is a little more of GS type of questions honge, but that's why you have to basically differentiate your answer with depth. Okay, and you will understand that when you basically get to that particular thing. Okay. Also, so let's say that you're writing your anthropology paper, right? So in anthropology paper, you don't want to say anything as matter of fact, right? So science may, most of you who have studied science, for us everything is it's black and white. Okay, this was the particular thing, and abhi this is the way things are done. This is exactly how we have it, right? So we want an answer that is like, who is this person, or who is this particular species in which kind of regard. So we basically are like, okay, aisa hai, aisa hai, aisa hai. But here you have to contextualize it. Okay, here you have to contextualize it. How did we come to accept it in this particular manner? Okay, are there any alternative hypotheses? Are there some scholars who are vehemently arguing for the other side, who are against this particular thought, right? You must have, some easy, like even if you have basically done some basics, you'll understand that, two people in the same field can have extreme levels of arguments, right? Malinowski and your Radcliffe Brown, right? Radcliffe Brown is also part of your functionalism, but he prefers to call it structural functionalism just because he wants to differentiate himself from your Malinowski. In fact, many scholars basically say he may not be anti-functionalist, okay, he's just anti-Malinowski. Right, now this could be personality clashes, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about their idea clashes, right? And these are the kind of things that you want to introduce into your answer, and this is basically going to make you go to that 1%. It basically shows you the depth. It basically shows you that you understand the concept. It basically tells you that you understand the history behind it, and you understand the conflicting ideas behind it also, right? This is something that you want to sort of like try to bring into your answer. See, comparing different sort of views, bringing in scholars who have different sort of perspectives on the same thing. Okay, cause and effect, okay, different sort of hypotheses, and so on and so forth. And I'll basically explain this in with some examples as well. Just take a look at this. Okay, so let's see what is the first example. See, the first example is essentially, let's say that you're talking about, the topic of Neanderthals, and specifically about one particular idea here, which is the extinction of Neanderthals, right? So rather than just saying that, we all know for sure, Neanderthals basically disappeared around 40,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, right? But scientists are still debating why. Okay, we have the evidence. Okay, so we have actually found in stratigraphy mein, we have basically seen in layers that, in certain layers there are like 35,000, and certain layers there are 45,000, a lot more sort of, intermixture with Neanderthals, and, in subsequent sort of layers, you're not able to find it. So we know for sure that Neanderthals maybe around 40,000 we cut off, right? But why? Add layers. Okay, and this is not one reason why. Okay, you should basically give multiple reasons why, right? And there are multiple reasons. For instance, you have this interbreeding sort of theory. Okay, so Svante Pambo basically, through his Neanderthal research, genome research kind of projects, right? So he has basically the smallest of DNA. Okay, they've been able to sort of like, find a lot of things, right? So some scientists actually think that Neanderthals actually didn't really vanish, but they interbred with modern humans, and you and I, or at least certain populations of the world, European, certain Asian kind of population basically have some Neanderthals in them, right? So that is something that you could bring in. Another one is basically competitive exclusion by Homo sapiens. Yeah, so modern humans have been, a lot more sort of responsive to change, a lot more sort of adaptable, right? So if we are a lot more sort of adaptable, maybe if we are not the strongest, they were sturdier than us, they were stronger than us, they had a bigger brain than us, okay, maybe we have social relations which are a little better, we are a little more sort of cooperative than maybe. So we had some advantages in survival skills, okay, compared to your Neanderthals. Okay, so slowly we outcompeted. Climate adaptability, right? So ice age and rapid sort of, environmental shifts that basically keeps happening, possibly put them at a little more sort of, made life a little harder for the Neanderthals than it did for us. Again, more responsiveness to change. But this is not it. Okay, you have multiple sort of theories, that goes even beyond these. Okay, so I've only given you the basics, but this is something that you would know, but these are the kind of things that you want to bring in to provide more analysis. So instead of saying that, they went, sort of extinct 40,000 years, you're also trying to bring in multiple layers, and you're not saying that it is only one particular reason that is right. Okay, is it one particular reason that is right? Okay, when you read your anthropology in a certain kind of depth, okay, and you go to books that are, providing you that kind of depth, you will understand anthropology is all a matter of a lot of debates. Okay, and a lot of strong personalities with very strong views as well. Okay, but the good thing is, as you find more evidence, as you find, you will have sort of many revisions as well in these kind of things. Now, for instance, race as a social construct. So what do we mean by race as a social construct? Now you have, let's say, don't try to just come out with a standard answer, race, it is, biological classification here. Now people say it's a social construct. So like, what is it, right? So introduce many different sort of ideas here. First of all, when you take a look itself, you have to understand that there is a whole debate that is happening here, and that debate is between biological essentialism, social constructivism. So what is biological essentialism? So biological essentialism is an idea, and when you do it, or when you have actually done it, you will understand it is a very old sort of idea that people are basically divided based on, different sort of features and things like that. Whereas social constructivism is that, okay, there is, different sort of race and labels, so race is basically something that is not necessarily based on biology, but it is based on the human need to sort of differentiate different groups. Okay, we want to create these new sort of labels, okay, and say ki them and us and so on and so forth. So there are some things, of course, I can't go into too much detail here, but you can understand, you bring in some sort of scholars, okay, what do they say, why do they say it? In fact, yahan pe context, if I say about context also, it's very interesting. In fact, actually Montague is a student of Boas. Okay, Boas basically came out with this whole idea of cultural relativism because he was, he sort of had to escape from Europe. Okay, Europe during his particular time was very anti-Jewish, right? World War II, and I'm sure that you know exactly what is the context in Jews scale, it was not a good place. And then he basically comes to the Western world, North America and things like that, and he does it. And then he comes out with cultural relativism because he has an experience, okay, of being judged for being different. Okay, and his student, who has been extremely influenced by Boas, basically he tries to sort of bring similar sort of ideas, but in the realm of biology. Okay, so what Boas basically did, cultural differences are because of, different aspects. He basically says biological things are also based on certain aspects. Uske pehle, there was strong views. Okay, Carlton Kuhn basically says that, maybe our ancestors are all the same, whether we are black, whether we are brown, whether we are, Mongoloid, whether we are European. It is not, but our ancestors are basically the same. Okay, but we as Caucasians, the whites, okay, we had a higher, faster rate of evolution. So we are ahead in terms of the evolutionary game, and there are certain groups that have evolved in a slower rate. Okay, so you guys, we have same ancestors, I give you that. Okay, but we have evolved more, so we are more advanced, okay, and we are more sort of superior, okay, compared to certain other kind of races that have not evolved at the same pace. That idea was there, okay, until very recent, right? If you can bring these kind of ideas, these debates, these alternate kind of hypotheses that were there, that got disproven, what is being politically correct, and then you basically end it based on, UNESCO's statement on race, or, many other sort of things, you can actually bring in many angles here, right? So if you can bring about all of these things, they will know, the context, they will know, the history, okay, they know, the different sides of this particular debate, okay, and what was the side specifically, okay, and why they should be wrong or why they should possibly be right. Okay, ये वाला depth आप दोगे, okay, this is a biological anthropology answer. Okay, this is a biological anthropology answer. Okay, this is an answer that basically is going to give you, the kind of score that you are basically fighting for, that 150 plus kind of scores. Right? Again, you take another sort of module. Okay, so this module is basically a question. So let's see what this question is about. Okay, so this is tool traditions in human evolution, right? So if you are writing about, let's say, archaeology, right? So you tend to have a very simple kind of a table in your mind. So and so particular hominin, okay? So and so particular time period, so and so particular kind of tools, and so kind of thing, right? So in fact, we basically have, let's say older one tools के बारे में लिख रहे हो, Homo habilis के बारे में लिख रहे हो, right? The idea is kind of very simple. Louis Leakey basically said that Homo habilis were the ones who made these tools, slightly larger kind of brains. They basically, the handyman, the larger brain, यहाँ पे we basically have to create another sort of a genus called the Homo genus, and from here on, a lot more sort of similarity, and we can study this human evolution. We can put them in the Homo kind of grouping and all of that kind of thing. But today we are basically having evidence of newer kind of places that are holding tools. Right? So in fact, you have places called Lomekwi basically having these tools. Jahan pe these tools are 500,000, 800,000 years even before the beginning of Homo habilis, or at least the proof that we have Homo habilis was there. Okay, it basically began in so and so kind of period. But uske bhi pehle 800,000, that's a lot. Okay, now so what is this? You're basically providing conflicting hypotheses. You understand the history, you're understanding the context, you're understanding how it is basically unfolding in the last 10, 15 years, right? Okay, so this kid is basically a lot more sort of, bringing in a lot more sort of layers compared to somebody else, who has a lot of, lot more facts, a lot more sort of points, and, but very matter of fact kind of answers, right? So what is happening here? So newer views, it could be Australopithecus guddi, it could be Kenyanthropus platyops, it could be, somebody else tomorrow, we don't know, maybe Afarensis, it's Eastern Africa, right? So we don't know, but there is a scholar, Sonia Harmond. Okay, she's making a very strong claim, okay, that these tools, first of all, she's basically trying to say that these tools are not necessarily, these are hominin napped, K-N-A-P-P-E-D, meaning there has been some amount of working, okay. It is not like some accidental fracture that has, created these kind of tools. It looks like these tools have been made by hominins. First of all, so that means, tools before Homo. Second thing, she's also saying that, these tools are very different from the kind of tools that have been part of this older one tradition, which is your, your pebble tool traditions, your, older one tools, right? Your Homo habilis kind of tools. So this requires a separate sort of, it has to be placed in a separate sort of tradition. That's also very important. So you understand, right? So there is a lot of things basically happening. Again, can you say that if somebody used tools, that means higher sort of intelligence? How are you defining intelligence? Yahan pe some ideas are there. Okay, in increasing brain hypothesis versus social learning. Is it something that it has really increased the brain size, the intelligence, and all of these kind of things, or is it like aping what we see around? There are scholars who basically feel that humans are the best copiers. Okay, we copy easily. Okay, so or is it an example of that, right? And so on. Okay, or is it co-evolution of brain and hand and culture? Like see, there are many things that basically come into these kind of topics, right? Thoda sa detail mein padhoge, thoda sa depth mein padhoge. So it requires that amount of reading, or sit with somebody who knows at this kind of level, or matlab kar sakte ho, right? So or you can do it in a good course, right, and so on and so forth. Right? So I hope you have understood what your answer should have. Okay, so your reading should be in sync with that. Okay, and your writing should be in sync with that. Right? Your short notes should be in sync with that. Right? I've basically given you an idea what should be part of your 150 plus, 155 plus kind of scores in your answers. Especially paper 2, this is a lot more sort of important, right? So paper 2, it is a lot easier to score, but a lot more sort of analysis is required. Okay, a lot more sort of depth is required, a lot more sort of layering is required, right? So that is that. So when do you start answer writing? See, I would basically say that as you do your course, as you begin, like in whatever way, right? So usi time mein basically try to get a lot of answers done. Okay, and that time you basically have resource, you have guides, you have somebody to take to, you can basically clarify your doubts. So make the most out of it. But let's say you're doing it by yourself, even then, right? So you've read like a couple of topics. Okay, try to not divorce writing from reading. Okay, try to sort of like marry them together, right? Okay, it need not be perfect. Okay, it need not be like 2-page answer. It need not be UPSC kind of format of answer. Okay, but what have you learned? What have you understood? What is the contextualization? What is the history? What is the debate? Okay, what are the alternatives? Right? In subka, writing could basically help you to a great extent. Okay, again, go step by step. If there is a syllabus, ensure that you know all parts of the syllabus rather than jumping directly into the PYQs. Okay, syllabus strong karoge, PYQs automatically solve kar paoge. Right? So that is another one. Okay, so when you go for test, let's say you progress a little bit, start with untimed tests. Okay, take 4 hours, but if you can score 150-ish kind of thing, great. Then you work on reducing the time. But when you reduce the time and basically start writing, okay, you will never get to the point where you have time to craft, time to sequence, time to prioritize. These abilities will not be, something that you will be able to sort of put into these time tests in the very beginning if you start. Okay, and do it consistently. So again, to summarize, what is the best sort of sequence of doing this? In case you take a particular topic, conceptual clarity, revising your notes, daily answer writing, making short notes, untimed tests. If you can do it during your course, great. Okay, you can do that as well. Okay, tests and requisite sort of value addition. Basically, you can do it either after a particular module. Okay, and then you can come here, or you can finish this entire thing and make your anthropology very thorough. And trust me, then you'll be able to compete with anybody. Right? You're good to go. Okay, and then eventually you basically walk into that exam like a tiger, right? When you walk in, that you have so many things that you want to bring in, okay, but you're not going to have the space for it, you're not going to have the time for it, but even a little bit of your knowledge basically somehow making its way into your answer is definitely going to differentiate you. It's going to make you stand out. It's going to make them feel that you are in the top 20, top 10, top 1, whatever it is, right? So that's my main idea. Okay. Okay, these are the general principles based on what you had asked me, and what should be the general principle behind, a very strong start, the sequence in which you have to do, okay, and what your answer should basically be like. Okay, so I hope that I've been able to answer all of your questions. Okay, it's very difficult to answer all of them and tell you exactly this is how you do every single module in a very short session, but I hope that you've been able to walk away with some amount of clarity on where you need to be once you basically begin. Okay, so with that, all the very best with your beginning, and I will see you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.